I'm joined by Jessica Clark,
Good
anchor and
morning.
reporter at First Coast News. Welcome back, Jessica.
Thank you. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, too. We're also joined by Jake Stofan, City Hall reporter at Action News Jax. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning.
John Daigle, political consultant, former political reporter, and co-owner at Daigle Creative. Good morning,
Good
John.
morning, Ann. Thanks.
And Christina Burgess, reporter at First Coast News, another First Coast News face. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning, Ann.
So I'm going to start with you, Christina, because the month-long government shutdown has actually had some very tangible local impacts for families. It's a story that you covered. This school called the Jericho School, which has been around for about 3 decades in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and Jericho School is located over in Arlington, and it's been open for more than 30 years. And, this closure kind of shook that community and also the parents who had children that go there. There are around 30 families who had children in this school, and the school, it provided some care and schooling to children that had autism. And so last week was when parents who had their children enrolled there kind of found out that temporarily the school would close because they were saying, they did not have enough federal funding that they needed for the school to continue running. And then around Sunday or Monday of this week, that's when that email and letter went out to parents letting them know, we're going to have to permanently close due to us not being able to continue operations because we're not receiving that funding. And they have a lot of military families that also go there, and TRICARE, which is the military insurance. Those are the payments that they need to continue to move and function, and they're not receiving those payments. And so they had to close.
And that does seem, for a school that's been around 30 years, and I don't know that we have this answer, but it does seem surprising, and I'm sure it was unsettling for the parents, but that just even a month of funding cessation would lead to its closing its doors permanently. It's been here for, as you say, more than 30 years and is an institution, something that, more than one generation of kids have grown up attending.
Yeah, I actually ended up finding a family, well, a mom and her daughter. They no longer live in Jacksonville, but her daughter, Elizabeth, started going to the school when she was 5 because she was not able to be in the DCPS schools, and she has autism. And from 5 to about 20 years in that school, her daughter, she said, completely made like a 180. She's now 31 years old. I spoke with Elizabeth also on a Zoom call. They live in Mayo, Florida, and she's playing the piano. She loves helping mom cook. And her mom said that without the Jericho School, her daughter would not be where she is today. And the big thing that I've noticed with talking with parents with children that have autism that are dealing with this, I spoke with another center out right outside of Mayport, is regression is the big thing. They're saying that only a couple of days without your child getting that hands-on tangible education, they can start to regress. I spoke with a mom out at the beaches who has a 5-year-old who goes to another center out there. And that was the big thing with her son. She was like, just a couple of days, he may not talk with us. And now he's talking, he runs to his therapist, he's excited. And then when you actually factor in the added on fact that they're military families, I come from a military family as well. And so I know how it is when sometimes there is just that one parent at home that's having to help that kid. And then when you add on other kids in the house, it brings about a challenge.
Yeah, that is a difficult adjustment for any kid. And John, you talk about military families, a lot of times they're moving around a lot. But kids who have developmental disabilities, kids who have autism, that kind of level of change can be particularly hard. Is it surprising to see, nonprofits you've worked with a lot in the community, are they particularly vulnerable to even just a month loss of funding?
Yeah, I'm from a military family too, and I certainly understand how destabilizing all those moves can be. But as you point out, our agency works with a lot of local nonprofits, and it's just been a terrible, difficult year in the nonprofit community. Not only just the threats to fundings that a lot of nonprofits have faced this year and what's going on with the economy, but so many of the nonprofits we deal with have had to shift their focus in reaction to things happening on a national level. Catholic Charities is one of our nonprofits we deal with, and they used to probably one of their biggest areas of emphasis used to be refugee resettlement. And they've had to shift completely and look more towards affordable housing just because of what's going on at the national level. And a lot of nonprofits are having to make those kind of huge adjustments based on politics and the changing winds in D.C.
If you're just joining us, I am talking to Christina Burgess, Jessica Clark, Jake Stofan, and John Daigle about the week's headlines. You can join our conversation on air by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org. You can reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. And of course, you can watch our live stream on the WJCT YouTube channel. I want to move on to kind of a different set of impacts that we're seeing also because of the federal government shutdown. And this has to do with SNAP benefits because those are scheduled to end tomorrow. Um, this is something that is going to impact, Jake, 42 million people around the country. But here in Jacksonville, it's going to affect close to 150,000 families.
Well, and statewide, it's about 3 million people, and about half of those are children. There's different different states taking different approaches. Some states are tapping into their own emergency reserves. That's something State Representative Angie Nixon here locally has been calling on the governor to do as well. The state has about $15 billion in reserves. I think about 5-ish billion of that is considered sort of the rainy day fund that the governor, in theory, could declare a state of emergency, free up those funds, and kind of backfill the lost benefits. But obviously, earlier this week, we heard the governor kind of scoff at that, solution, saying that this is a Washington problem. Washington needs to solve it. I don't see the Democrats calling on the Democrats in Washington to vote to reopen the government, which would also potentially be a solution to this. But there are some states that have gone that course. There's also 26 states now suing the USDA to try to get the USDA to backfill SNAP benefits with the $5 billion reserve fund that it has. That's something that has been done in past shutdowns back in 2018, I believe. But the USDA is saying that, it can't do that or it won't do that. And, even if it were to do that, we're only talking about 2 or 3 weeks of relief. So
Right.
it's not really a long-term solution. At the end of the day, the government needs to reopen in order for these benefits to be, reestablished and secured.
It's a little bit of a game of chicken, I guess, Jessica. And so, a
Yeah.
lot of people um, caught in that game. One of the things that was reported earlier this morning on this station is just the fact that, while you were talking about poor people and the meals that they need to buy, it also has an impact, for instance, on grocers who say that
Yes, I heard that. That was
it
fascinating
was
to
something
me.
like 12% of their business comes from SNAP benefits and EBT cards. So,
Exactly, and it's not just, the small mom and pop stores that, will take EBT, but also major grocery stores that take that as well, and so that then is a drain on the, money coming in and the money being spent by customers. I'd even thought of that,
yeah.
but I think that that just shows how, much of an impact that the federal government does have on everyday life in local communities and at local businesses.
This is also something that, grocers, John, as they look to prepare for the holiday season. I mean, we were talking this morning about the price of chocolate and the candy for today's holiday, but they're buying right now for their upcoming holidays. They're putting in stock for Thanksgiving and kind of all of the things that people start to buy around this time of year. But grocers themselves, if they're not getting that money, can't lay those in store. And so it also impacts their
Yeah.
own stock.
And I think it just adds to the general instability that it is not good for the economy in any way. I mean, nothing in the economy likes uncertainty and instability, and we were already hearing for months about how we're on this bubble, and you should make sure you're saving for a rainy day, and then you add the government shutdown on top of that existing instability, and it just makes it makes people hesitant to buy houses, to change jobs, to do everything that drives the economy. And that's kind of where we are right now. And whether, regardless of whose side or who you blame for the shutdown, I think that generally, and that on top of a lot of other things that we've experienced over the last year, tariffs, everything else, it's just adding to this general sense of, what's next? I've got to be prepared, if something bad happens, and just does not make people in general feel like investing for long term, things like housing or j- employment or those kind of things.
Mhm.
Sure. And I know that local stations have done some good reporting on food resources that are available to people who need it. I know here at Jacksonville Today, they've done some good reporting. And in fact, our own Will Brown was talking about how at food markets, particularly like Riverside Arts Market and the corner store, Deb's Corner Store, Earth's Farm and Market, if you spend, you get actually double the value of your SNAP dollars if you're shopping at a farmer's market. And so that, can help people go a little bit further. But Christina, just thoughts, this is coming as Florida is also likely facing big impacts on Affordable Care Act prices going up. Those are also something that are coming due right now. People are starting to see the fact that their monthly premiums are in some cases doubling, quadrupling.
Yeah.
So a lot of cost issues coming to bear for Floridians.
It is. It really is. And you mentioned the holiday season also just fast approaching. And I even know a lot of times people turn to those resources and help, maybe like a food bank. And we've even spoke with some food banks that are like, we're worried about if we will even have enough food to last up to that time. And so that calls into question a lot of concerns. And here locally, I think we've seen community really show up because there's just been restaurants out at the beaches. I know there are chicken pot pies and different barbecue places that are just like, if you come buy a meal, if you have a child with you, your child will get a free meal. And so, in just such an unprecedented time where we're just a lot of uncertainty is there, community is showing up and
Yeah.
trying to help in ways that they can.
Yeah, it's
And
so
I will
important.
note that even organizations, nonprofits that do not take federal handouts are feeling the impact of the federal government shutdown because the strain is on organizations that do take federal grants and whatnot. And so when they're full up or are turning people away, sadly, those clients are going then to organizations. There's one pie in the sky that is feeling the impact because even though they don't take federal government handouts, they are seeing more people come to them
The
because
need
there's
is greater.
just so much of a demand. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to move on in a bit. We're going to talk about some campus impacts and some high school impacts related to the assassination of Charlie Kirk and continuing fallout in the public discourse around that. But I want to move first to a topic, Jessica, that you have been reporting on really for months. I mean, years,
Years.
right? Safe to say. This has to do with Marineland, which is this iconic Florida attraction. It has a rich history. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, but its future is really uncharted right now.
Very much so. And, it has had various owners over I think it's 78-year history. It started in 1938, but right now is a critical time for it. The company that owned it, the Dolphin Company, filed for bankruptcy in March. And this was the week when we were expecting a judge to give her final yes or no on a bid because Marineland is on the auction block because of the bankruptcy procedures taking place. And so the judge comes in, we're listening to the hearing, and the final bid has come in for $7.1 million from a Texas-based company called Delightful Development and 6 acres of beachfront property. I mean, this is ideal property right there, right? Um, and the judge seems pretty irked from the very beginning that the debtor's attorneys, so the attorneys for the company that's going bankrupt, had not revealed that it's a functioning park with 17 dolphins, 1,200 other animals of different species. And she said, next time you come to me, you need to let me know what's at this property. And so
It's not just a vacant beachfront
she had
parcel.
every idea that it was like Gulf World and Panama City Beach, which was also part of this case, that was empty, no more animals, no more business. So twice she called Marineland a unique place, a unique property. And so she did not approve the $7.1 million bid. That was the highest bid. And she also told the attorneys for the debtors, I encourage you to reopen the bidding process. And so we have a hearing that has now been set up for the beginning of November, where the debtors' attorneys are expected to come back and provide more complete information about what's actually happening at Marineland because it is open for business. You can go and hang out with the dolphins, swim with the dolphins, whatever it may be.
What is interesting, Jessica, is that what didn't really play a part in this bidding process is that there are other people that would like to buy Marineland, acquire
Yes.
Marineland, and preserve Marineland.
Yes, and that's the way that the judge found out because those other people filed a letter in the court documents and said, we thought we had a chance to bid. We had come in with $5 million. The debtor's management company in this whole bankruptcy process, the management company actually handling these businesses now, told us we were a bidder, but then said, no, 2 days later, you're not a bidder. And so there's some confusion about what happened with this particular group of dolphin professionals who wanted to place a bid of $5 million,
These are people formerly associated with Marineland.
formerly associated with Marineland and also dolphin researchers.
Okay, and they want
And
to
they
save
want to
it.
keep Marineland, basically. And so they were very upset that they feel like they were kept out of the bidding process for whatever reasons they don't know. You can make assumptions,
Well, they
but we
don't have as
won't.
much money, right?
They don't. It has been hinted at that they are getting more money if
Mhm.
the bidding process will open again. So yeah.
But they only have about 10 or 11 days to pull together essentially twice as much money as they've currently sort of put out there as money that they have.
Well,
Maybe.
not necessarily twice as much. So the highest bid was 7.1 million. They had 5
Okay.
and 1.5 million to keep operating during the slow winter season. So that's 6.5. And
Okay.
then they've hinted that they are possibly getting more.
They could get close.
So it could get very close. On top of that, you got to factor in if this company that comes in with 7.1 million actually gets the bid, they're going to have to move 17 dolphins. That's costly. If the group that has right now 6.5 doesn't have to move 17 dolphins, that's money that is then saved. So there's some question about, will this balance out in the long run, money wise?
Jake, this is a story that you also covered this week. I saw you down there at Marineland, one of your many stories in the last couple days. So this is not necessarily a question of like building or saving for conservation. It would be preserving this facility that has not been without controversy itself. Some of the dolphins that have been relocated there are from this other
Gulf World and Panama City
in
Beach.
Panama City Beach. There were a lot of complaints. There were 5 dolphin deaths, and then these other dolphins that kind of were relocated to Marineland, are thinking about captive animals and animals used in performances or swim with the dolphin events has evolved. And so, there these facilities are not without controversy.
Yeah, but I think that the former employees would argue that of many of these, Marineland has had a very good track record. They say that their USDA reports have come back clean. That this has been an incredibly important facility and kind of a groundbreaking facility in terms of dolphin research in general. Not only dolphin training, but also I guess they are accredited with the first live birth of a dolphin in captivity. And some of these dolphins that they have are in their, as I learned, like in their 40s, or in their 50s.
50s,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, like I didn't know dolphins could live that long. And it's kind of like with these dolphins, they were saying, one, they can't really take new dolphins in from the wild. That really, since this research started, I guess there's a type of virus that most wild dolphins now carry that doesn't really impact them too much in the wild because it's just kind of ingrained in the species now. But if you were to take a new dolphin in and put it in this park from the wild, the dolphins that have lived in captivity their entire life would then come down with this virus and would be much more susceptible to that virus actually impacting them. So it's not like you can just take these dolphins and go toss them back in the ocean. They're
They
going to have
wouldn't
to
make
go to
it.
some other facility, and most of these dolphins have lived there their entire lives. They're multi-generational in this facility, so I think there's a strong argument to be made that they're maybe best off there unless somebody else comes in with a much better facility.
Yeah.
I'd never been to Marineland, and I
Oh.
love saltwater aquariums. I want it home.
Yeah, it's a cool facility. It's not quite as big as it was at one time. John, you probably have been to Marineland. I mean, I kind of
Yeah.
remember back when there was restaurants, there was the old Moby Dick Lounge that had a big
Oh, yeah.
rocking ship in it, and they'd throw a glass of
Yeah.
water in your face to,
I mean, I have been there. I'm born and raised in Florida, so I've been there and I swam with the dolphins. And I think it, like a lot of businesses, became victim. When 95 opened up and A1A stopped being the main route through Florida, it fell victim to that. But I don't know. I mean, I this is a fascinating story to me. And the first time I read it, of course, I tend to be a little cynical politically, but I noticed, I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, that this number two bidder in this bidding war was the Hudson
Hudson
Company.
companies, yeah,
And
from
when
here
I
in St.
saw
John.
that, in my mind, again, I tend to look at things through a political eye. I said, the Hudson Company is a very influential, politically powerful company down in St. Johns County in that area. And my first thought was, they're not really in the habit of losing these kind of things. I'm trying to see
Mm.
how all this shakes out, and if at the end of the day somehow Hudson ends up winning this bid after all.
They're the developer behind Oakleaf
Yeah,
Plantation, behind Silverleaf, and of course Travis Hudson
right.
was an elected official down there
Yep.
for a number
Oh,
of
yeah.
years and was
Yeah.
State
a
senator.
principal.
So I would
Right.
keep my eye on that. Again, I tend to be a little cynical on this, but if at the end of the day it doesn't end up with the Hudson Company owning that property, I'd be surprised.
I just want to read a couple of messages that sort of date back to our previous conversation. Brenda on Facebook saying, ironically, the Republican governor in Ohio is stepping up to give his people some assistance. Why can't the Florida governor do the same? That's in reference to our SNAP conversation. Tiffany on Facebook saying, let's shift the narrative from, quote, kids on SNAP to, quote, families doing whatever is necessary to nourish their children. And then an email from Ricardo saying, Mr. Rutherford, John Rutherford, the congressman, hasn't had to work for a while. The lower chamber has now gone 41 days without holding a single vote because the chamber also spent all of August and part of July out of town. It has only held regular sessions on 12 days out of the last 100. And he says that that's taken from Gabe Fleischer's Substack, Wake Up to Politics. So if you're just joining us, we're talking to Jessica Clark, John Daigle, Jake Stofan, and Christina Burgess about the week's headlines. And if you would like to join our conversation, please give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. I do want to move on now because there's a variety of topics emanating out of college campuses, high school campuses, some of them sort of related topically to the assassination of the founder of Turning Point, which is Charlie Kirk. The first is a story of the first teacher. And we've heard a lot of teachers suspended over comments that were made after the assassination. This, as far as we know, is the first known firing. Jake, this is a story that you also reported on this week. So this was a teacher at UNF.
Yeah, so he's a visiting professor named Jacob McElroy. He's taught at UNF sort of on and off for a total of 6 years. He's a UNF alumni. I spoke with him yesterday because when you read the words on the page of the termination letter, you kind of left going, in what context was this said?
Yikes, right? Your
yeah,
first think yikes, right? Because it
yeah,
sounds
there was when it's just in black and white and you're left without any context, you're kind of going, why was he saying he was going to shoot students exactly? What was it?
remind us what did it say he said?
It said that he said he had access to firearms and he was going to shoot everyone, and there's a lot of the termination letters written in the context that this was all said the day after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So, sitting down with him and just going, what were you doing? He's kind of a theatrical guy, if you will. He is certainly quite educated, and I think he has kind of a style of teaching where he sometimes kind of plays roles, if you will. He basically said that because his class focuses on writing to an audience, that he was felt that it was important to sort of address the topic, which was sort of the hot national topic that day, right? Everyone was talking about it, and there was a lot of dialogue around it, good, bad, and ugly. And he was trying to play, I guess, a character of a professor who was utilizing sort of the discourse of, I guess, the assassin, right? That if you disagree with someone, your response is to kill them or say that you're going to kill them and use violent rhetoric. And he was under the impression, and I think other students in his class were under the impression, that they were kind of in on this, that he was not being serious. He was trying to demonstrate, how a mentality like that can shut down debate and shut down discussion. And I don't think his intent was to make light of the situation, but we've all had kind of interesting college professors who've done things like that. I think that he was trying to come from a good place, but there was at least one student in the classroom who uh, was not in on the joke or was not in on the bit. Took offense to it, recorded the lecture, reported him to administration, and I think administration just, one, didn't really see the educational value in what he was attempting to do, and two, just felt that he had maybe lacked judgment. And you're talking to a freshman class, you're assuming that these people maybe haven't experienced gun violence themselves in their life, or
Mm.
you come from a background in which that people don't talk to each other that way. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
It was an interesting conversation you had with him, and we actually pulled a clip from that conversation. Let's take a listen to how he explained what he was trying to do.
I started to take this dramatic theatrical approach where I started to portray myself as like almost a maniac version of a professor who was operating under the new rules of American public discourse. And in the course of doing so, I did joke that if students disagreed with me or questioned me, the new rules must be that I must therefore now shoot them because that's what we do now when we're in disagreement. And so I went on in this elaborative, demonstrative irony to decry that very sort of thinking.
So, John Daigle, I want to ask you about that. I mean, you've taught at both UNF and Flagler College. This is a visiting teacher who's brought in. I've talked to, I was speaking to one teacher at this school who said, especially for these introductory classes, you have an visiting professor brought in. They're not given a lot of instruction. They're not given a lot of perhaps sense of, ways to conduct their classes. They're given a lot of freedom, and perhaps that is changing.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's a lot of changes going on, and like you said, I've taught over the last 10 years or so at UNF and Flagler, and honestly, and I have trouble getting too excited about both of these local stories that happened this week, both with the Turning Point flyer, which again, probably some stupid decisions by some kids,
We'll get to that in a sec. Yeah.
and this story, which again, I don't have any problem with the ideologies and the way I obviously wasn't in the class. I read the stories, and I read that most students in the class took it as a joke, obviously, except for at least one. Um, Honestly, when I read the story and I read what Jake reported and others and the Spinnaker reported, I had problems with this teacher for other reasons. I mean, the way I think he maybe should have gotten fired because he's dropping F-bombs in classes and role-playing active shooters with freshman students. Those are dumb decisions. I wasn't in the class, but I think more so than anything, that seemed to be a reason for not having him teach freshmen. I think the more disturbing story that I read this week related to it was the firing of the college professor down at Southwest Florida State College, who the Florida Education Commissioner fired because they looked at his syllabus and saw what they deemed as gender ideology in his syllabus, and that worries me a lot more.
Mm.
When I signed up, I'm teaching in the spring, and when I came in to sign up for classes and go through HR at UNF earlier this month, the two big things that I had this semester, which I don't recall in the past, are one is I had to take an oath, which didn't bother me very much because as a former military officer, I pretty much everything in that oath that I had to take, I already had sworn to when I entered the military. But I could see where, especially in this environment, in today's environment, having to take that oath in order to get the job might bother some people. The other big change this year was my syllabus now has to be made so that any parent can go online and read my syllabus. They're instituted this new thing called Simple Syllabus, which is to facilitate anybody can go on and see what's in my class. That troubles me as well. I think because I know that there are people who are looking at that, looking for outrage, and that outrage is the thing that is driving today's social media and a lot of the traditional media and politics, and it seems like that is so much. It's I teach political communications. Do you know how hard it is to teach political communications without discussing or criticizing some ideology?
Or even some party.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm lucky because I don't count on my teaching. I do teaching mainly as in my mind, public service, because as an adjunct, you get paid almost nothing. But so I don't have to worry about losing my job and my source of income. But most professors, that is their source of income. And the thought that you could say something that might offend somebody or outrage somebody and lose your job the next day, that's a really tough environment to work in. It's just, I think so much of today, media and politics is just driven, and it's social media is a lot of the reasons by this outrage. And I really believe that's the reason why the only political persuasion growing today is the independents. And I think so much of the other parties are driven by this outrage as their fuel. People are just really getting sick of having to worry about offending anybody.
Sure. One of the things that comes out of this story too, Christina, is the fact that this was a secret recording that was made in class. Florida is a two-party state. As journalists, we all know that. You can't secretly record unless everybody, it's called a two-party state. It's an all-party consent state, meaning that you can't record anybody if anybody has not consented. But that changed in 2021 in Florida. The legislature and the governor adopted a new policy, basically a new law that says that kids can secretly record their professors. And it's created some difficulties for professors, feeling that they have the ability to openly communicate, kind of what John's talking about. It is
Yeah.
hard to cover difficult subjects without occasionally stepping into territory that may or may not be hard for people to hear.
Yeah, and Jake said something that I was even saying in my newsroom when we were reading about it was we've had college professors that have said some things in our time in school, and you raise your eyebrows, and I was always the person that I would call my mom and be like, my professor said some crazy stuff when I was in class, but I'm like, just gonna take my notes and keep it pushing. But I mean, I think also when you're in a certain role, you have to keep certain things in mind, and you have to make sure that you're walking a very fine line and making sure that you're making sure all of your students, because especially at certain schools, you have everyone in your seats represented. Everyone's not going to look like you and everyone's not going to think like you. And even with it being a freshman class, that adds on another layer. Not saying that it would have been okay if it was older students, but you just have to keep certain things in mind and be mindful that anything you say, it can come back and it can hurt you, depending on what you're saying.
Another thing that is happening on campuses is, the future of teachers who are coming from abroad. The governor now saying that he wants to roll back at the state's colleges and universities these H-1B visas that allow highly educated people to come and take jobs that require, college education, essentially. That is not that many people, Jake, that you reported at UNF, but other schools much more so.
Yeah, UNF was, according to the governor's office, only about 19. And that's, professors, but I mean, the governor listed a whole laundry list of different, occupations that H-1B visa workers are being used to fill in colleges. Some like graphic designer for a sports team, some roles where I could see someone scratching their head going, I mean, we got Full Sail, right? I mean, it's like right next door. But yeah, UF, which obviously is, planning to expand and build a campus here in Jacksonville, has about 500 employees. So I think the big question is,
On those visas.
yeah, on the H-1B visas. I think a big question here is what exactly is the governor proposing? Because he talked about, wanting to be done with them, but what does that mean? Does that mean, once these contracts expire, you can't use H-1B visa workers anymore? Is he going to roll it back? Is he saying anyone here on an H-1B visa working at a college or university, those contracts need to be terminated and we need to, fill those positions with Floridians or Americans? I think the devil's maybe in the details in terms of what kind of impact this would have on a university, because UNF hiring 19 additional people overnight, challenging, but probably not going to be too disruptive to operations. But when you're talking about 500 employees at UF, it could be a very different story. And then you get into, are these unionized workers? Is this going to violate employee contracts if you're terminating these contracts early? So a lot to still sort of be sorted out. We're going to have to see what the exact proposal the Board of Governors comes up with and moves forward.
The governor is also weighing in on a partnership, Jessica, with that he says, and we don't again know the details of what this would look like, but he wants to create a partnership with Turning Point. That's the Charlie Kirk organization, and it comes at the same time that this week there was a on-campus controversy John sort of alluded to at Fletcher High School, where students are creating a Turning Point chapter, as are a lot of campuses and a lot of kids these days since Charlie Kirk's assassination. The governor has said he wants to further that. He wants to make sure all schools can do that. And yet, a flyer that was distributed to students had some troubling imagery in it that some other students and some parents objected to.
It did. And so it makes you just, gosh, it makes you question and wonder what is good for schools and what is good for students. And are adults trying to push their ideology on classes and on schools? But the flyer did have some troubling imagery and words and messages. And so, when I was in school, there was pray at the flagpole, and you did that. It was voluntary, and you had to do it before school started. I think we did it every week or whatever. But it was, and it was probably more Christian pushed than other religions who were involved. But I remember that was only to be allowed before school because it should not be interfering with the rest of the school day.
Mm.
And so that's immediately what I thought. Now, of course, there are various Christian organizations, Christian athletes, and whatnot that are at school campuses. The turning point, while it does have, of course, a Christian base to it, it has become quite political. And so it'll just be interesting to see what happens
Yeah.
and whether that school is going to put the stamp of approval on it, or are there going to be conditions, like I just mentioned
Yeah.
30 years ago, when it can only take place at certain times.
I mean, it sounds like, the formation of the club is one thing, and it does sound like they have, John, basically said that flyer was inappropriate. What some students have said is in part because it showed a handgun and it had a message there about using weapons.
Yeah.
That some students saying, look, if it was any other group, that club would have been suspended or sanctioned in some way, as opposed to what they considered kind of just we're going to retract that flyer and sort of a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, I mean, the flyer was stupid, and whoever was responsible for the flyer, needs to learn a lesson from that. I'm assuming it was a teenager, a student who was responsible for it, and I don't want to overreact to that. It's kind of coming back to what Jake was talking about with the H-1B visas. That's one of the biggest challenges today, is to know what we should react to, and what is just red meat, clickbait stuff being delivered for the base. I mean, the governor's comments about reducing H-1B visas is disturbing, but we don't know like you said, we don't know the details. We don't know if it will actually happen, or if it's just some talking. It's kind of the same way Trump this week talking about restarting nuclear testing. It's hard to know what is the appropriate response to those kind of statements, because so many of them are just thrown out there and then nothing ever happens to them. So I think that's the challenge in today's environment, is what do you reasonably react to, and what do you just dismiss as, they're just trying to generate more outrage.
Mhm.
We got a call from Denise in Mayport. Good morning, Denise. Just briefly go ahead, please.
Hi, why aren't your guests explaining explicitly what was on that poster at Fletcher High School? At least I don't recall anyone saying it. I believe it was 9mm is quicker than calling 911. Why is that simply troubling imagery? That is gun violence advocacy.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, it actually said 9mm beats 911 every time,
Mhm.
and it had a picture of a handgun. And then there were some other images that people, or phrasing, I guess, just talking about how, every time someone moves to Florida, it's a potentially like a person that hates America with a vote. And so, yeah, there was a variety of things that people did not appreciate about the language. And the gun imagery in schools is, very concerning, Jake, these days.
I mean, think about it. I mean, before my time, I remember I did archery in middle school, and I think even further back, they had like shooting clubs in school. I mean, yeah, I mean it's certainly
Different time.
a lot. Yeah, it's people don't like it. I mean, I think that message in general is probably more commentary on home defense, the idea that if somebody breaks into your house, you know, you're measuring your potential response in seconds if you're armed versus waiting minutes or whatever for the police to get there. I mean, I think it probably could have been phrased a little bit differently, but
Yeah.
a lot of posters try to simplify messages. I suppose I can certainly see why people were offended by it. Obviously, they were, and I believe the principal came back and said, this wasn't authorized, and they're not using it anymore. So be sure to read every word that ends up on a piece of material you're publishing. Right? Don't just pull an image down off the Turning Point website.
All right. I want to take a call from Linda in Mandarin just briefly. Linda, go ahead.
Yes, your last guest was good, but that was a lot of sane washing. We have open carry laws here in Florida. If somebody says 9mm is quicker than 911, they're saying that I have the right to kill you and stand your ground, Florida. That is not talking about home defense because they weren't publishing that at home. They were publishing it for college students. So
Yeah.
let's not sane wash. Let's just talk about what it really is. And we're under duress on every side from government and from individuals who now feel free to threaten other citizens if they think differently than they do. Let's be frank about what's going on. Don't sane wash it this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. We've got a call from Tom on the west side. Good morning. Go ahead, Tom.
Good morning to y'all, too. Just want to say that even though inclusion is out of fashion right now, this club seems to me to be the opposite of inclusion. With all the antis that Kirk is associated with, it seems guaranteed to offend people in schools, and I just don't think it should be there.
Thanks, Tom. Christina, just briefly, I want to talk about this business improvement district. We've got just about 30 seconds, but the 5 Points merchants are now going to pay a little extra.
Yeah, they're going to be paying a little bit extra to protect their streets. I spoke with the vice president of 5 Points Association who said one thing that stood out. He was like, this is just a small district wanting some local control to make their streets safer. We also were covering last week, or this entire month, there were some break-ins on some businesses. And in the last years, there's been some break-ins. So what this will do is this will tax these business owners that live in this district. And in return, they will be able to have some security, also bring about some beautification and keep those streets safer and kind of govern their own district.
It'll be something interesting to watch,
Yeah.
a self-taxing district. Jessica Clark, Christina Burgess, Jake Stofan, John Daigle, thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.